Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the closing ceremony of the Symposium on Multi-Stakeholder Engagement in Forest and Protected Area Governance for Conservation and Livelihood. For the entire week, we have had the privilege of engaging with experts, academicians, and researchers from 11 countries touching on various key topics on how all stakeholders can be part of conserving our natural resources. Following all the sessions, we are now going to have the chairpersons and moderators from the various sessions to give their thoughts and key findings. Moderating the session is Prof. Ahmad Ismail, President of the Malaysian Nature Society and advisor to the MNS Environmental Education Division. I would like to remind all our viewers today that we will have a panel session at the end of the summary and key finding session. So if you have any questions for our session chairs, do feel free to drop your questions in the question box, and we will try to answer them if time permits. If you do not see the question box, please refresh your page and you would be able to see it below your live stream. So in session one, we touched on policy support for multi-stakeholder engagement in forest and protected area management. Moderating the session was Yang Berbahagia Datuk Dr. Haji Muhammad Puat bin Dahalan, who is the Senior Director of the Forest Management Division at the Forestry Department of Peninsular Malaysia. Unfortunately, Yang Berbahagia Datuk is not able to join us today due to personal reasons. So in his stead, we will have Prof. Ahmad Ismail to give us a summary of session one. Please give a warm welcome to Prof. Ahmad. Prof. Ahmad, please take it away.
Oh, so thank you very much, Sir Hafiz. I'm going to talk on behalf of Datuk Fuad. Then I think I have prepared to start earlier than that because I need to give some highlights on maybe some of our participants today. They just attend this closing ceremony. So I want to highlight a few things. Won't take long. Number one, why we are part of the reason why we are doing this, because we realize that in Southeast Asia we have a very high biodiversity in our forests, and Malaysia is among the top 12 of mega biodiversity country in the world. So in the early speech by the Secretary General also mentioned on this, and Malaysia have long commitment since Rio meeting in 1992, and it followed through until now. After 30 years, we still continue to maintain our forests about 55%. We are under forest cover. So then we set a lot of many rules and regulations and international treaties. We joined all the international treaties, including we practice a certification to make sure our forests are well managed. So history of Taman Negara is something that very interesting. It was established in 1938 before Malaysian Nature Society was born. And now the issue of Taman Negara still in the highlights in terms of conservation, managing wildlife and the benefit to people. And then the government have give a lot of attention on biodiversity. That's why we have a biodiversity policy, and we have a special focus on Central Forest Mine, Heart of Borneo, and now we are doing forest restoration by campaigning 100 million trees. So this is a thing that among the government initiative, and after we realized that ecotourism is one of the important attraction for country's economy, and then nature conservation is become in the focus. So poverty, we need to solve the problem. Poverty, problem of indigenous peoples and local community that are living near the forest. So the program of ecotourism, forest restoration and management is part of it to support their livelihood. This is among the government initiative. And what we discussed today is to bring the multi-stakeholders together. The engagement of multi-stakeholders is very important to support the government initiative, especially involving NGOs who can become a media or bring people together in order to implement the policy. So what we need to do now, we have to bring people together systematically right? Systematically. So what we discussed in the first session was to bring policy to practice. So this is very important, and few issues were highlighted. For example, on the co-management, when we highlight the local community, indigenous people, we need local participation. From the keynotes presentation also, you have seen that discussion around how research, information, involvement, local community and indigenous people to enhance the information, exchange knowledge, training, and so on, so that the management of the forest in better shape. So another thing is how to make the local involvement, local community and government agencies involved. So we need to have a lot of participation at local community or at a national community. We have many agencies now. I can see because as Malaysian Society demand for engagement with the government agencies, so we are in many communities, and as you know, Malaysian Society, we have 14 branches in every state, and all states issues. The state government should employ or engage MNS branch members to be in the committee when they talk about multi-stakeholders, when we talk about forest protection and so on. So public and local participation needs more involvement in short in all implementation of the policy. So in that way, we can bring the policy into practice. So that is in general, because in the session 1, we talk about policy and we talk the example of the public awareness and public engagement, what public to know, what public want to know before any development is carried out. So the involvement of stakeholders, the involvement of indigenous people, the involvement of local communities is very important in translation of policy into practice. Thank you. Thank you, Hafiz. Over to you.
Thank you, Prof, for that very insightful and concise summary on how policy support can play a vital role in multi-stakeholder engagement. So in the second session, we covered institutional design for pluralistic forest and protected area governance. Moderating the session was Mr. Muhammad Yusaini bin Mat Yusof, Director of Forest Eco Park and State Park Forest Division at the Forestry Department of Peninsular Malaysia. Without further ado, Mr. Yusaini, you have the floor.
Thank you, Hafiz. I'm Mr. Chair for the session 2, institutions designed for pluralistic forest or protected area governance. Went very well on 24th of August. We have 4 speakers, which are number 1 is Professor Abdul Subhan Malik. Speaker 2 is Mr. Mat Jahir Alam. Speaker 3 is Dr. Mat Wasiul Islam. And speaker 4, Professor Magala D'Souza. So that's the summary that can be made as follows. For speaker number 1, Professor Abdul Subhan Malik has shared there are 4 co-management committees that exist, and these committees are responsible for overall governance as well as mangrove protected area. So an assess in being made towards the stakeholders' perception on good governance principle corresponding to stakeholders' participation, transparency, responsiveness, fairness, legitimacy, and organization's capacity in mangrove protected area co-management in Sundarbans of Bangladesh. So for the next speaker, number 2, Mr. Mat Jahir Alam, talking about an institution analysis of multi-stakeholders engagement in peatland forest governance, the case of Raja Musa. So as far as concerned, when I was head of enforcement in Selangor State Forestry Department, it's very close to me. So what we can describe of this paper is party is talking about a participatory rural method divided into 4 components with stakeholders workshop. So then the speakers also talking about the outcomes, the emergence of the complex multi-stakeholders of this peach farm forest governance, establishment of the strong collaborations among the several sectors, local CBOs enrichment with the environmental and livelihood development, training, networking with the development agencies and grant capture, and negotiable ecological. Whereby the speakers number 3 by Dr. Mat Wasil Islam is explained about the co-management organization as innovative governance structure for the managing the Sundarbans mangrove forest protected area in the Bangladesh, where traditionally managed with was top-down approach. The objective of the study was to focus about assessment of the performance of this co-management organization, with the acronym as common here is managing the Sundarbans mangrove forest. So we can see the result about CMA, knowledge-based partnership. CMO encompass diverse stakeholders with the provide a platform to discuss various issues which lead to opportunities to overcome many challenges management based of challenge and social, cultural, economic, environmental, and institutional challenges creates different mode of the complexities of the uncertainties. However, it is taking time to change the attitude of the stakeholders to work together. And the final speaker by Professor Bangala D'Souza is talking about the forest-based ecotourism in Sri Lanka, a review on state of governance, livelihoods, and forest conservation outcome. So the study is talking about the study has identified forest-based ecotourism destination, analyzed experience of the good governance, evaluated enrich of local livelihoods, examine natural resources conservation, reveal other side of the ecotourism, and suggested policy for sustainable development. What can be summarized during this session is the importance of the forest for the well-being of the community by taking into account the interests of stakeholders and this community. That's all my report for the session 2. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yusaini. It feels good to know that collective community efforts can actually result in good governance and local environmental protection. Moving on, in the third session, we touched on the topic of actors and power in forest and protected area management. Sharing this session was Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Azani bin Alias, Head of Department of Nature Parks and Recreation of the Faculty of Forestry and Environment at University of Putra, Malaysia. I'll now hand over the floor to Dr. Azani.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum and very good evening to all. The session 3 entitled Actors and Power in Forest Protected Areas Management have run smoothly for 2 hours on 24th of August on the second day of Symposium. And we have 5 presenters share their experience, and it's very unique according to where it was held. And this is a very interesting session, and it starts with Dr. Elizabeth from Quirino State University, Philippines, present about the migration, land acquisition, and bundle of right, the case of selected community-based forest management project in Nueva Vizcaya, Philippines. The management and supervision of FFL area in Philippines have been held by the government with the DENR as the mandate agency. And under the government management, forest law and policy have been highly regulatory, centrally controlled, and industry-based. The forest tenure instruments recognize and legitimize the peaceful occupation of community already living or residing the FFL area. Tenure reform enabled tenure holder to plan for the use, development, and management of tenure area. Survey and delineation of individuals, claim, resolve conflict between members, tenure holders were able to exclude other members from accessing the resources. Tenure reform that started from more than 20 years ago are still within the term and condition of the DNR. However, this tenure reform may be step in further improving the provision of the CBFM program in the future. For the second presenter, Dr. Hermat Hidayat from Indonesia Institute of Science present about the stakeholder engagement on agar-wood trading in Indonesia. And we know that agar-wood is characterized being it was non-timber product and a high economic value because of the price. And in nature, the authorities face a difficulty in control the agar-wood harvesting. To make sure the production of agar-wood enough to charter the market, the plantation of agar-wood were introduced. For the cultivation, agar-wood started from the local farmer. It will be linked to the district or province collector or local government to support and also to provide the nets and then the next is to link to the big trader of agar-wood in Jakarta and also exporter, and lastly export to overseas market. Our third presenter, Nurul Nabila and Silain Eng from Econite, introduced about the communicating climate change through a cinematic experience. This is a little bit different. Econite is not a profitable environmental organization established in 2005. And its core focus area is in a capacity building in area of community engagement and environmental education, smart partnership with corporate or government agency. And they have more than 2,000 films have been produced for the past 14 years. Either is in documentary or film type. And for the film type, the mostly topic cover are on climate change, forest conservation, wildlife protection, energy efficiency, local community, and also the indigenous culture. And in the conclusion done by the third presenter, it is important to consider audience preferences and incorporate various stakeholders and scientists to ensure the film convey valid evidence-based message which can help improve public receptivity and engagement with climate change science, mitigation, and adaptation strategy. And from MNS, Ms. Lee Yu Ling talk about the role of non-state actor in the protection of urban green environment with the case study in Malaysia. And we know Malaysia are also depend on exploring or utilizing the forest resource to generate income for the economic value for country. So for that being said, you can see a lot of urbanization in the town eventually in the whole Malaysia is very important for us to protect this area. I think the important element was to ensure the city to function as transformation drivers, promoting public learning and also innovation which can promote the importance of urban green lung. Like Celine said before this, we have this information, but the question is how we are going to channel out this information to the people out there is the most challenging part. And then the promoting conservation on nature and biodiversity also a mutual responsible. Adding on top of that was environmental education and also the outreach are very crucial by looking at the major issue and concern and also working together to address it. The recommendation here was adopt and promote sustainable use of land and resources in urban development. Environmentally sustainable and resilient urban development with the involvement of multi-stakeholder are very important as well. So we need a function ecosystem, forestry canopy which are benefiting the local community beyond just the recreation and aesthetic value. So with that, we are able to promote safe, inclusive, accessible and quality public spaces as driver of social and economic development, including property value, facilitate the business and public and private investment, and also the livelihood opportunities for all. We all need a high commitment to improve and integrate this green infrastructure to connect, conserve, manage, and also enhance the resources which is serve as key priorities include in comprehensive power planning at national level. So while at the international level, financial agency or funding agencies such as government aid agency NGOs, supported fund, and etc. are committed. Participation will be very important and need to be approached. And our last presenter from United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, Mr. Arif Faizal, who talked about the conservation of coastal greenbelt through co-management in Bangladesh. The challenges and lesson, and the mangrove forest facing some challenges. We all know that high dependency on coastal people on these forest resources. And there's also high mortality of monoculture plantation, limited people to participate, and also limited effort on species diversification, insufficient incentive, and also ineffective intersectoral coordination, the socio-ecological resilience study, and co-management. So he tried to find out the challenges and opportunities of the coastal greenbelt conservation through co-management. Result from his study was direct benefit from the coastal greenbelt for the forest-dependent communities are insufficient but significantly important for reducing vulnerabilities and the extreme event, just like have been mentioned before. So to ensure alternative way, the forest resource protection group and co-management committee are provided micro capital grant with an arrangement with forest department to protect coastal greenbelt in a sustainable way. As conclusion, the benefit sharing mechanism in coastal area are need to be defined by the government, and forest department must own the mechanism. Lastly, for department also take over the responsibility of the FRPG in Bangladesh. With that, I would like to conclude my summary of session 3 this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Very diverse and unique experiences indeed. Ecotourism and forest conservation is evolving, and it is a great sign that state governments are now much more open in collaborating with local communities in creating sustainable stakeholder engagement and forest management. Thank you very much, Doctor. On our third day of the symposium, many speakers talked about community-based forest and protected area management and livelihood improvement. Dr. Wong Ipin, Assistant Professor from the Faculty of Science at University of Nottingham, Malaysia, chaired one of these sessions. Dr. Wong is also the Principal Investigator of the Management and Ecology of Malaysian Elephants, MEME. Dr. Wong, please take it away.
Thank you, Hafiz. I'd like to thank the organizing committee for inviting me to be the chair. It is my honor to be here with so many important people. For my session, we talk about community-based forest protected areas management and livelihood improvements. So we had 6 very interesting presentations from experienced speakers who are practitioners with hands-on experience running community projects on the ground, and academics carrying out important research on communities and livelihood from diverse countries: Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Philippines, Malaysia, and India. So our first speaker was Mr. Previs Manan. Our second speaker is done jointly by Dr. Indika Rohan Palihakara and Ms. Manisha Kalpani. Our third speaker is Mr. Joel G. Karik. Our fourth speaker is Dr. Huda Farhana Muhammad Muslim. Our fifth speaker is Mr. Shah Reza Hussain. And our sixth speaker is Mr. Salam Rajesh Singh. So Mr. Previs Manan started with sharing about the afforestation and agroforestry program in Pakistan. They established eucalyptus plantation on barren lands, and Mr. Previs Manan studied the economic benefits of this plantation for 3 types of village organizations: good organization, moderate, and weak. He found that organized communities are more successful and productive, and the eucalyptus plantation provide major fuel wood source for the communities, so they don't have to go elsewhere to get their firewood. And it also provide major raw material for the composite wood industry. And it has changed the non-productive barren lands into an important resource for the community. And however, he highlighted that they avoid planting on forest areas. So they search for barren land and they carry out the afforestation project there. So they managed to raise return from the initial investment for the community. And but they show that the community only earned about 29% of the market value. So Mr. Previs Manan acknowledged that the environmental management is very important, and careful planning is required when we carry out such plantation, because eucalyptus have impact on local ecology and may damage roads and buildings. Yes. So the second speakers, we have Dr. Indika Rohana and also Ms. Manisha. So they looked at the leprosy communities that resettled near the Sinha Raja forest, whereby the community main livelihood is from tea farming, and they have to carry out secondary jobs working in the nearby plantations. From their study, they found that there's a need to increase more opportunities for the community to get jobs at the plantations, and there's a need for interventions from the society. However, they find that the plantation jobs are suitable for the community to carry out. So our third speaker was Mr. Joel G. Karik. He talked about sustainable watershed management project in Quirino, Philippines. In this project, he worked with tenured landholders to undertake sustainable watershed management activities, including reforestation and patrolling, to ensure that they can enjoy the good environmental service from the forest. This project is a follow-up project after a successful initiative under the UNDP SGP funded project. Yeah, so with the success of the first project, the community increased their buy-in into the program, and they are able to scale up best practices, lessons learned, and they found encouraging results and participation from the stakeholders. So next we have Dr. Huda Farhana binti Muhammad Muslim, and she shared with us another successful community empowerment case study, this time in developing community-based ecotourism, facilitated by the Forest Research Institute Malaysia, FRIM, as the technical agency supporting the community. So the community set up an association, and they have applied for approval for 30 hectares of land in Ulu Tampik Waterfall, whereby they carry out ecotourism project independently. So the community is able to raise income and is a profit sharing together with the State Forestry Department. And the nature guides are all certified under the Ministry of Tourism, and with more than 15 years of experience. So the success of this community have invited visits from other interested communities who want to set up similar ecotourism ventures elsewhere. Next, we have Mr. Shah Reza Hussain, who is the director of Perak State Park. He manages the state protected areas. Mr. Shah shared about the success of the Menrak community-based project at the Royal Belum State Park. So the Menrak, the Jahai Orang Asli, who carry out wildlife enforcement in the forest, where they remove snares and other enforcement work. And Mr. Shah shared that the project has 3 key elements for success, which are empowerment, livelihood, as well as knowledge sharing. So they have managed this, through this effort, they managed to reduce the snares found in Royal Belum rainforest from thousands and down to only 5. So they are reaching close to zero poaching, and this is a very encouraging case study. So from this project, Mr. Shah emphasized that it is about value creation. So for every Menrak that goes out for patrol, they make a minimum of, for one patrol, about 100 ringgit, and an income will go to the village funds as well. So there are some portion that goes to the patroller and some portions will go to the village. And this enable the buy-in from the whole village into the program. And the Menrak Patrol Unit are considered heroes in their communities, and they help to educate the younger generation about the importance of wildlife. And in this aspect, the Perak State Park work closely with NGOs such as RIMAU. The whole project for the income, for the Menrak patrollers actually from the NGO RIMAU. So Mr. Shah highlighted the importance of collaboration as the key for conservation success. So in retrospect, both wildlife and forest resource are everyone's responsibility, and we all can play a role in helping the community to protect the forest. So our last speaker is Mr. Salam Rajesh Singh, who talked about his engagement with 3 communities in India, where he worked with local villagers to restore degraded forests, and in doing so, increasing the water supply and resources for the communities. Yeah, so he worked in Kampi Forest, Village Forest, Dailong Village, and also Zekulong Village. They set up the reforestation project and also the spring rejuvenation effort. So they create water source for the communities to use during the drought season and also during the monsoon season. And this project managed to restore the stream along the hill to create large water bodies such as the Thong Jarot River during the monsoon season. So overall, the session was very fruitful with many interesting case studies featuring research and projects with community. Thank you, Hafiz.
Very interesting key findings there, Dr. Wong. If I could take one point that stood out for me, Doctor, it's that I find it very uplifting to know that we are not just working towards reducing, but actually eliminating poaching activities by empowering our indigenous Orang Asli and Orang Asal in the forest monitoring activities. That stood out for me. So another similar session, session 5, on the topic of community-based forest and protected area management and livelihood improvement. We had the pleasure of having none other than Tan Sri Dr. Saleh bin Muhammad Noor chairing it. Tan Sri Saleh is the longest serving MNS president, a combined 30 years, and is now its senior advisor and the advisor to My Forest Watch. I would like to invite Tan Sri Saleh to take the floor. Tan Sri, I think you're muted, Tan Sri.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Good. Yeah. Thank you very much for inviting me in this session and summary of all the various sessions. I'd like to congratulate the other 4 chairperson before me on a very informative, succinct presentation on the summary. Well, I had 6 speakers in my session. The first one was Mr. Nagarajan Rangasamy, who spoke on the efficiency of Friends of Mangrove Program in Sabah, Hutan Bakau by the Global Environmental Center in developing community capacity through mangrove conservation and sustainable alternative livelihood. This was done under the Global Environmental Center, which is an NGO established in 1998. And the NGO, the GEC, works through communities. And this project, which they did, was working with communities on mangrove management and to enhance the capacity of sustainable livelihood. They have a communication, education, and public awareness program called My SEPA, which they planted mangroves over 60,000 trees within one Leke mangrove degraded area. And they learned certain things there where they said they need to involve the communities on a long term, not just on a short term basis. And you must avoid being biased in terms of selection with communities and need to provide confidence and encouragement to the communities and maintain good relationship for long-term sustainability of the program. The second was Dr. Lim Teck Win, who talked about community forests within forest reserves in Peninsular Malaysia. And he dedicated his presentation to the late Mr. Balu, who was the MNS conservation officer, who unfortunately passed away about a month ago. You remember him fondly. Then he mentioned the background of forest management in Malaysia, dating over 1,000 years ago. I'm not too sure where he got the 1,000 years, but be that as it may, no way of proving him right or wrong. He showcased cave drawings, pretended to be patai, fruits resembling buttresses of fruits in the drawings. And then he mentioned that in the way forest management as people-backed programs, and government manages all forests, and there isn't any framework for community to manage them. So in other words, the forests are by statutes, by law, managed by government. So communities have very little opportunity to get involved, with some minor exceptions. He talked about customary law, statute law, court judgments, policies, and in the conclusion, the first step is using policy and putting pragmatic is to add a new category called community forests, and later to create meaning to this. And in this regard, I think I interjected that there is the first community forest being formed in Kota Damansara Forest Reserve, which is the oldest forest reserve in Kota Damansara, which is now acknowledged and as a community forest park, as a community forest managed jointly by the community with the help of the forestry department. So this is the first, as far as I know, the first forest reserve to be managed jointly between the forestry department and the communities. The third speaker was Associate Professor Dr. Nor Idayu Mahat, and she spoke on measurement of social impact on the development of Taman Nade UUM, University of Utara Malaysia, an application of design thinking and SROI. This topic was a bit way above my head because she's talking about philosophies of the Taman Nade UUM. And we did ask her to clarify what Taman Nade is. And according to her, Taman Nade was a park. It's a park around, it's a park about 475 hectares, virgin and secondary forests in UM, where projects have been conducted to provide various options for the community. For example, fruit orchards, tree planting programs, and for the campus to use this park. The design thinking of Taman Nade is a simple design to assess consumer needs and how people will interact with the environment. Since they're ambitious, and congratulate them. And then she talked about the social return on investment measurement, SRI, a new methodology that was created by the team that measures not only the finance, but the social impact value of relevant to the stakeholders. And by using this SROI, they were able to convince management to manage the park that started into 2020, but slowed down due to the pandemic. The fourth speaker was Professor Dr. Engineer Christine Wulandari, and she spoke about community social capital for the conservation of forest biodiversity in Forest Park Register 19 in Lampung province, Indonesia. And Lampung, as you know, I think is the southern end of Sumatra, just opposite the edge of Java Island, and where they introduced conservation area of 27.14 million hectares with 552 conservation area management units, quite a huge area. And therefore, inevitably, there were conflicts, and how they resolve these conflicts through technical guidance and conservation partnership. And the partnership is defined as a form of cooperation between stakeholders mutually beneficial in achieving common goals. And here they talk about the WAR Forest Park site. And one of they did SWOT analysis, QSPM tests, etc., where they did a correlation analysis between the characteristics of the respondents and the social capital. Quite an interesting project. The conclusion was that biodiversity efforts through partnership can help promote awareness within the people, and the social capital variables should be considered with biodiversity conservation through conservation partnership programs. The fifth speaker was Wong Chun-hei, where he talked about rural community engagement in the Pakas community, where the European Union Partnership Program, it was funded by the European Union, strengthening non-state activity involvement in forest governance in Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and Papua New Guinea. The project aims to equip non-state actors with capacity, access to information, networking opportunities, and policy advocacy skills to ensure that they can have a stronger voice in the forest governance of the respective countries. And looking at IBAs, important bird areas of national policy level, state level, local level, community group involvement, etc. And the last but not least, Dr. Jatna Supratna talked about community-based forest management through tourism development in the Sembilang National Park, South Sumatra province. This initiative started in 2017 to call one of the biggest national parks in Sumatra with mangrove forests of almost 360,000 hectares, which is huge, whereby the area behind the national park has been burned. So they need to understand the mangrove and the area around this national and the interrelationship between these two areas. President Jokowi planned that 30% of nature tourism, included nature tourism with Indonesia, will have one of the highest biodiversity, since Indonesia is having one of the highest biodiversity in the world. The analysis carried out showed that very little revenue was generated at the moment through tourism. Maybe it's because of COVID, but the potential contained is huge. The idea came from wanting to know how to get a park that is jeopardized because of burning, encroachment, and community, and how the community can get benefit from the park. And he suggested a buffer zone to be part of the community-based project as well. So in a nutshell, Hafiz, Mr. Chairman, that's the 6 speakers in that session. There were a lot of questions been asked, and they were duly answered by the speakers. Thank you very much.
As you always put it, Tan Sri, great leaders don't tell you what to do, they show you how it's done. And it seems like it's apparent in the work all the presenters in your session had presented. Thank you so much, Tan Sri. Now, moving on to session 6, we delve into empowerment of gender and indigenous communities in forest and protected area management. We had Dr. Chong Ju Lian moderating the session. She is the Associate Professor of the Faculty of Science and Marine Environment at University Malaysia Terengganu. Dr. Chong, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. So for session 6, empowerment of gender and indigenous communities in forests or protected areas, we have a total of 5 speakers from several Malaysian unis, namely from UMT, UPM, UKM, UM, and UIA. For the first speaker, Mr. Muhammad Hafiz Sulaiman, he investigated the economic development program by the government to investigate whether this would actually increase or either decrease the livelihood of orang asli to poach the pangolin. Okay. However, for his study, there was mixed results as he only conducted the survey in 2 villages. So as such, we know that the orang asli are well aware, and they're also very accepting of the 11 types of EDP programs that have been implemented by the government. For the second speaker, we had Miss Akila Mokhtar, who is currently doing her PhD in UPM with her title Mangrove Mudflat Ecosystem at Sungai Buloh, Selangor, Impacting from Anthropogenic Event, a Decade Crisis. So she talked about physical pollutants and chemical pollutants, which is causing pollution at Sungai Buloh, and due to this pollution, there will be impact to the cocker beds and also to the mangrove forest. As such, she suggested that both government and researcher will have to play their active role to prevent and also to clean up the polluted areas. While for the third speaker, we have Dr. Sharina Abdul Halim from Lestari UKM with her title Kubang Badak Biogeo Trail Langkawi UNESCO Geopark, an exploratory case of sustainability in action. So in her talk, she talked more on community engagement in sustainable development projects. So for this, she talked more on promoting behavioral intentions and inclusivity, as there were some lessons that were learned from her studies. While for the fourth presenter, we had Mr. Kamal Suhaimi Fazil from UM. So he started with a video play on the Orang Asli being interviewed. So this was a different outlook on, as we could actually see how the Orang Asli felt towards certain things that issues that affected them. So from here we see that we need to develop a sustainable partnership blueprint for community conservation areas, and we also need to recognize and also acknowledge the rights of Orang Asli. For our last but not least speaker, we had Associate Professor Dr. Zaliha Kasim from UIA with her title Kong Kong Mangrove Forest Masai Johor, Community Participation in Kong Kong Mangrove Forest Conservation. So she highlighted some of the feedback from the community, and then it is learned that the mangrove will both have reserve areas and also they are protected, but they are also at the same time threatened by human activities. So overall, we can see from here that the indigenous and local communities are increasingly being recognized as guardians and knowledge keepers of our natural heritage around the world and also in Malaysia. As such, we need to ensure that all the stakeholders, especially the indigenous and local communities, are actively involved and their voices are heard, their rights acknowledged to ensure effective outcomes from any community-targeted programs. Although there are many attempts to get the local communities and indigenous communities to be involved in conservation and ecotourism activities, but there are no one approach that can fit all, as we need to take into account of each community's unique differences based on their cultural, their belief, their attitude, and also other factors that might influence their behavioral outcomes. So that's my wrap up from session 6. Thank you very much.
It is very promising to hear that with good collaboration, local and the indigenous communities are realizing the potential in protecting the biodiversity in their ancestral forest. Thank you, Dr. Chong, for your summation. Moving along, in session 7, we talked about governance and biodiversity conservation. We were honored to have Puan Siti Khadijah Abdul Ghani from the Biodiversity Management Division at the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources to chair the session. I'll now hand over the floor to Puan Siti.
Thank you, Mr. MC. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude for the opportunity given by the organizer to join this symposium. In session 7, entitled Governance and also Biodiversity Conservation, there are 6 different presenters giving a broad perspective of how the component of governance, which is the community, the forestry, authorities, as well as the Orang Asli and Orang Asal, could work together in conserving different species. So in the session, they share 2 species, the avi fauna, the birds in Imbak Canyon, as well as the Sunda pangolin in Peninsular Malaysia. So we have the first presenters, Ms. Shamimi, one of the staff from MNS working in Imbak Canyon. She is sharing how they had conduct different census in monitoring the bird species along different trails in Imbak Canyon. And this project tied together with the Orang Asal in the heart of Borneo. And then we move to the second presenter, Dr. Nurul Iza from University Putra, Malaysia. She gave some insights of how forest fragmentation give direct impact to wildlife in terms of roadkill issues as well as inbreeding issues. And then the third and the fourth presenters are from University Malaysia Terengganu. Ms. Nur Nasuha and Ms. Intan Fazria are sharing their qualitative studies through questionnaires with different Orang Asli village on Sunda Pangolin. So it's quite interesting to see how these young children have their thought on what are Sunda Pangolin. And I think this is very important for us to know that we need to groom our young generation for them to see the bigger picture of how could we manage our biodiversity in future. And then we have two presenters from University of Chittagong, Bangladesh. We have Mr. Qazi Nazrul Islam, as well as Professor Muhammad Jashimuddin from Institute of Forestry and Environmental Sciences, University of Chittagong. So both of these speakers are sharing about to have a forest protected area, we need other entity for co-management as well as the local people, the forest governance, and they share also what are the threats, the risks that they have to face to get through on conservation of a piece of land. I'm very proud to have to share this session with them. And Mr. Chair, I give that back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Puan Siti, for those very interesting insights. I'm hearing that there's definitely a lot of potential in SEPA activities moving forward in Malaysia. Moderating session 8 on the topic of reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, forest conservation and livelihoods, we had Dr. Tapan Kumarnath, Associate Professor of the School of Environment and Geographical Sciences at the University of Nottingham, Malaysia. Dr. Tapan, the session is still hot and fresh. Please take it away.
I'm muted. Thanks, Hafiz. So we just have finished.
Doctor, I think you went muted again. Sorry. Okay.
Thanks, Hafiz, again. Yeah.
Yes.
So we just have finished the session, the last session of this symposium. We had 3 presenters. First one is from Nepal. So he talked about carbon sequestration potential of community forest. So taking a case study, he showed us how to measure the above ground and below ground carbon, and so that we can estimate the carbon that can be captured by the whole community forest. And then he suggested to include this community forest into the carbon financing mechanism, for example, REDD+. And in second talk, it was from Tunisia. So they talk about the pluralistic governance for implementing REDD+ project. In case of forest management, as we know, nowadays many actors are involved. It's not about the government agencies or the forestry department, but even within the government, there are many agencies are also involved with forest management. So it's very important to keep the interaction among all actors when we make any decisions. Because REDD+ mechanism is a financial mechanism, So every actors will try to have their stake on this. In that case, we need to ensure the good governance practices, and that's how state to ensure social justice in case of implementing any RED Plus project. And the third one was about the RED Plus policy in Malaysian context. So the presenter talked about the reforestation activities by community people and how to include this reforestation activities under community forest into RED Plus. So he suggested to find out alternative mechanism of financing community forest, because RED Plus project itself is very complex in nature. It's very technically sophisticated, and transaction cost is too much high. So the real benefit to the local communities is very minimum. So in that case, it's better to point out alternative mechanism. So for example, we can involve private sectors in financing reforestation program as part of their carbon neutralization program. So these are the suggestions that made in this session. So that's all about from the session. Thank you, Hafiz.
One of the more technical topics, but extremely interesting nonetheless. So much potential in carbon storage to explore and implement. Thank you, Dr. Tapan, for your quick turnaround in summarizing a session that was less than a couple of hours ago. Now moving on to the first of two workshops on international perspective in managing stakeholders for activities related to forest governance in Malaysia. Moderating the workshop was Dr. Kriben, the president of Friends of Bukit Kiara since 2018. Dr. Kriben, the floor is yours. You may be muted, Doctor.
Yes. Okay. I've just got that sorted out. Can you hear me now?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you, Hafiz. Let me try and do some justice to this. Yes, as you mentioned, the theme for workshop 1 was related to the international perspective in managing stakeholders for activities related to forest governance. We had 3 speakers, Dr. Ham Gurung from BirdLife International, Mr. Noel Resurrection from Haribon Foundation in the Philippines, and also Mr. Tibertius Hani from Burung, Indonesia. It was really quite an interesting session, actually, with some very practical sharing of the breadth of stakeholder engagement in the region and how this engagement has worked on the ground. In his paper, Dr. Hum gave us the big picture in relation to forest governance by communities in the region. He touched on the ongoing BirdLife projects in 4 countries and provided insights into forest governance, including the effective use of technology, i.e. satellite sensing, to monitor forest cover and in particular areas. So that was quite interesting and certainly quite an in-depth insight. The second speaker, Mr. Noel Resurrection, presented on multi-stakeholder engagement in the Philippines. And he confirmed that despite the important legislative framework, which the indigenous, this involved the legislative framework on Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, IRPA, in Philippines, they were still, which was achieved actually in 1997, there were still quite a lot of continuous struggles in getting the Indigenous Peoples' rights to be acknowledged. He reflected that it takes time to influence the local decision makers to favor the IP inputs. Even with the framework in place, there was a lot of this groundwork which was still needed, which was to be done. So it was, I think the framework was very important, but I think, what he was reflecting on is that there was quite a lot of work to be done to actually move forward with this, even with that in place. There was a sharing also of all the different tribal communities in Philippines and how they were playing an important role in forest governance. He talked about the free, prior, informed consent, the FPIC process, which I think was fascinating, and how this engagement was actually going, and he highlighted some of the issues, particularly in terms of the length of the time required in terms of the engagement, and afforded some potential ways of reducing that in practical senses. He also mentioned some of the challenges in terms of engaging the indigenous peoples. This was primarily related to literacy levels, some of the tribes involved. But I think it was quite interesting to see that in terms of just involving people in the projects, some of these issues were actually overcome, and he highlighted some of these, which were really quite positive. Going on to the third speaker, Mr. Tibor Hani, he gave us a taste of stakeholder engagement on the ground in Indonesia, with special focus, of course, in the Mbeliling community in Flores, where he is stationed. Mr. Hani reflected on the fact that at the beginning of the community engagement, there was a lot of resistance from the community. And so they had to do quite a lot of work in terms of awareness related to the tangible relationships between the ecosystems and the daily lives of the community. And this was raised to get the buy-in. And I think, fortunately, they were quite successful in doing this. And of course, often increasing income streams was highlighted as the primary concern. So again, relating how conservation relates to their community and economic life really helped in terms of the buy-in. So I think that was very fascinating, and again, good sharing. I think for many of us in working with different communities elsewhere in the region. To engage the community, they were using this Village Resource Management Agreement approach, the VRMA, which I think has been quite successfully used in local villages. And this engagement has led to an understanding of the values of each of the stakeholders, and also developing some common goals. I think this was been quite interesting. And this included things like increasing community awareness, of course, of the ecosystems I already mentioned, and how this impacts livelihoods, and encouraging things like conservation of forest ecosystems, its services and related benefits. And finally, improving understanding of the importance of regular monitoring, managing and conserving forest ecosystems and services. So all in all, Mr. Chairman and Hafiz, I think the workshop one session provided great examples of stakeholder engagement. I think I learned a lot, certainly in the session. There was a talk about challenges also, and of course, some of the significant gains which were made over the last few years. So with that, thank you. I think that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Again, a lot of lesson learned that we can apply and reappropriate in projects in Malaysia and within the region. Great key takeaways, Dr. Kriven. Thank you ever so much. And now, last but not least, discussed in workshop 2, Urban Community Forest for Society, moderated by Dr. Tapan Nath of University of Nottingham, Malaysia. Dr. Tapan, the floor is yours again.
Thanks, Hafiz. So it was a lovely workshop today, because we all know about urban community forestry, basically in Malaysian context. So whenever we say community forestry, it's usually involve community forestry in developing countries where people are dependent on forest for their livelihoods, right? But in Malaysia, basically in the Klang Valley, urban residents people, they are trying to conserve some small patches of forest nearby their housing areas in the name of community forest. So in this session, in this workshop, we had 3 speakers. We had Dr. Krivan, we had Dr. Krivan from Bukit Kiara, and we had Eileen from Kota Damansara Community Forest Society, and we had Elisha from Shalom Community Forest Society. So if we look at these 3 examples, in fact, their strategies, their activities, their purposes are almost same, to conserve this remaining forest. But the problem is their intention is to conserve the forest for use by the people, not for collecting any materials from the forest, just to manage forest as community forest. That's all together we are managing. But this community forest is not legally, we should say, supported by Malaysian Forest Act. Because in Malaysian Forest Act, there is no term about community forestry. There are many other terms. So that is very unfortunate, right? So if we compare this community forest and community forestry in other parts of the world, is completely different. Here the intention to conserve for future generation, to provide services to the people, to the country, to the community, right? So in their discussion, we had some challenges. So for example, we don't have any legal entitlement of this concept, right? So it's very important. Otherwise, anytime, even though government is gazetting some parts of this forest, but anytime they can de-gazette. Is happening in some other parts of Malaysia, right? So gazettement is not enough. I think a commitment, a sincerity of the government, of the agencies to conserve this forest for humanity is very important, right? So it's not for personal interest. It's interest for the whole community who are living here, right? So the government people, sometimes they ask, I think we have colleagues from forestry department here. So please don't take it otherwise. They ask, what are the economic values of this forest? I think even we don't have many studies in Malaysia, but in many countries, we have lots of studies, the economic value. And if we compare the economic value of per hectare oil palm and per hectare rainforest, is far, far higher than the palm oil if we quantify all the ecosystem services. But unfortunately, we are not getting cash money from this forest. But if we convert it in indirect values, it's far, far better than what we are talking about the economy. So in that sense, I should say, I'm not summarizing this session, but I'm just sharing the some thoughts that our policymakers can consider. So it's not about the economy, right? What we'll do with this economy? So in this pandemic, right, we all are talking about GDP. So can GDP stop this pandemic? No. But if we can conserve our nature, I think we could reduce the intensity of this pandemic. So that's the importance of conserving our nature as community ownership. So that's the thoughts that we could say from the summary of this session, workshop 2. Thank you very much.
For those who caught the session earlier today, I'm sure you can agree with me that it was an interesting session, but even more so an important topic of discussion, as these community forests may very well be within our suburb. So Dr. Tapan, I'm taking away from what you said, commitment and sincerity. I think you've set the tone for our panel discussion. Thank you, Dr. Tapan. So having said that, now I yield the floor to Prof. Ahmad Ismail to moderate our panel session. Prof. Ahmad, you can have the floor. Prof, we can't hear you, Prof.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Hafiz. Very interesting discussion, but I have a lot of things to ask because I want to make a conclusion from our discussion today. And it's the conclusion is not mine. Conclusion is us. So I started with just now the policy and into practice. The policy into practice. So I want to ask from all the moderator of the session to help me say, for example, how to make policy into practice, because we have been discussed this for I follow through all the 10 sessions. They are talking about the involvement of the community, indigenous people, local community, And then we talk about knowledge, about a lot about education awareness. And then another thing good is about showcase, meaning that something that you can feel, you can see, then we can follow. But I think look scattered, right? But maybe we can put it together from your group discussion or session. What conclusion that we can make from this from the discussion? Say, for example, we are talking about laws, about regulation, about the government involvement, about stakeholders engagement. How to put it together in your session? Your session. If you can bring it together, it's okay. But that my part, I will to do it. Say, for example, I'll tell you, to educate people, we need knowledge. From how to get knowledge, we have to do research, right? There are examples there from the different session. So maybe 3 minutes is every moderator can tell me very simple words, so the someone can take notes. Say, for example, we touch a bit about political will. We don't touch in detail about gender. I mean, we talk about money, about financial, but we don't go in detail about how we want to get money, for example, because to practice, we need law, recognition, government involvement, money, and so on. So through your discussion in your group, can you tell me in 3 minutes what we can do or what we can conclude from our symposium? Who would want to start first? Number one, I mentioned already group number one because Dr. Fan is not here. This group are talking about policy and practice. That's what we are. I mentioned about we have the policy, but the issue is now how to practice. Right? We have international recognition agreement. We have policy in the country, but how to practice it. So that is our observation and our group discussion. But follow through that, we have another group. So who's number two? Yusaini. So what can you conclude from your group?
Thank you, Professor Ahmad, for the question. So knowing as a forester in Forestry Department, Peninsular Malaysia, we know that forest in Malaysia is under state matters. So I would like to share about the second presentation talking about this policy in Peninsular Malaysia, and the paper also related to other country. Another three speakers. We are talking about this the analyzed experience of the good governance. Every country are talking about this how we can help the government to be good governance in managing the forest. So this is a collective effort between these two, between the community and this government agency. Do all those we have to have a good effort to put on hand in to be a good listener the community demand to have the good governance to forest management. The rest what we can what just I can summarize during my session is the importance of forest for the well-being of the community by taking into account the interest of stakeholder and the community. I think that's my simple conclusion.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Number two, Yusani is no, Yusani. Number three, what is Azani? Cannot coming back. What's number 3?
I think his line is not working, Prof.
Not working?
Yeah.
All right. So we go to Dr. Wong Ipin.
Okay, Prof. Ahmad. I think the key take-home message from my session is the importance of organization. You know, the committee have the structure, they have the support, and in order for it to be sustainable, without the structure, we find that the initiative will not, sustain. So, and I think a lot of case studies look at the importance of livelihood. Working together with the committee and empowering them, giving them the sense of they can achieve something on their own. I think that is very important. Often we focus a lot on the technical stuff, but actually the soft skills, building trust, creating that relationship with the committee is very important. That is the key take-home message I got from my session.
Thank you.
And I feel, yeah,
continue. You have some more?
And I feel this cooperation that created between the agencies, from the government side and the community, from there we can get the implementation of all the policies developed by the government. So once the committee have buy-in, and then we can see the result of that partnership. Thank you so much, Prof.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Wong. Now our champion, Tan Sri Saleh. Unmute, unmute, Tan Sri.
Thank you, Prof. Well, my session is quite straightforward in terms of community-based forest management, and it is, in a sense, an aspiration, a desire, a hope that communities can give the right to manage. Let's start from the Orang Asal, the Penans, for example. They've been living in this forest for donkey's years. And there comes the loggers, Samling, and all the big companies come and log and destroy their livelihood, destroy their source of fisheries, destroy the trees where they get all the fruits and etc. etc. And the forest department doesn't do anything. And that's why we have Bruno Menzer coming to the picture and creating an international uproar in the European Union about our mistreatment of natives. And in this regard, the natives in Peninsular Malaysia, I don't think is much better off either. My fundamental solution is this: we have to give them education. Once we educate them, they get a proper education, then they won't want to go and live their own old ways of living off the soil, as it were. And this is not forcing them, because once you educate them, they will live. They would want to live in the urban areas like any other Malaysian. Look for a good job, and we have proof of Orang Asli who has had gained a PhD, and now I believe he's happily living in somewhere in Wilayah Persekutuan somewhere. So the fundamental issue of forest governance is not to force the issue of governance to the people. We would like to, but the issue is, do the people themselves have the ability to manage? I mentioned the issue of Kota Damansara. This is exceptional because the Kota Damansara is the oldest forest reserve in the country, and the state government wanted to convert that to housing. MNS and a number of institutions fought for it. And with the help of the political masses at that time, we managed to conserve it. And now it has become a community park where it is jointly managed by the forestry department and the Friends of Kota Damansara. Now, whether that model can be developed elsewhere, I'm not too sure. Because land is a state matter, and the states will not want to give up the right easily because of the revenues from the forest. Now, we have got to give them an alternative source of income. What we could ask for or request is joint management of parks, national parks. Because to my mind, the wildlife department have not been very successful managing our state parks and national parks. For example, Andarampin, Malaysian Nature Society, as you know, fought the creation of Andarampin National Park, but the management has been very poor. And the potential for Andarampin as a park for ecotourism with the watershed from Singapore is huge. And the many things, other things that needs to be discussed.
So, Tan Sri, you have mentioned we have the showcase to show. We have the example, but we need better governance, right, Tan Sri?
Yeah, and better people to lead this.
Yeah, okay, right. Thank you very much. Very good. We can adopt that plus other supports. Next, number 6, Dr. Julian. Dr. Julian, yeah.
Okay, hello, Prof. Hello, everyone. So overall, I would say that after hearing the session, it is very important that we have to also understand the local communities and also the indigenous communities. We have to see what they actually want. Because sometimes, although the government and also like we, the outsiders, we have ideas for what is considered best for them, but they as communities and individuals, they have their own ideas of what they want. So true, education is one thing that we have to look at, but also livelihood is also another thing. So this is the main factor that I see that comes into conflict when you talk about why certain communities or why certain sites, they are not so happy to accept interference. So for example, the first speaker spoke about pangolin poaching by the Orang Asli. The Orang Asli are both active and also passive poachers in this aspect. So will increasing their livelihood actually make them decrease poaching? That was something that we were talking about. And also at the same time, how some of the local communities and also indigenous communities felt that they were left out from the development that has been happening around them and also in their area. So indeed, we have to take into action, and trying to incorporate them into all these conservation activities and also development programs to ensure that all this is going to benefit them in the long term. So that is what I think that we should understand.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Julian. Next, Siti Khadijah, how are you?
Good, Prof.
Yeah, okay. What is your thinking, your ideas, your conclusion from your group?
I think I'm the only one representing Malaysian government here. So we have a lot of policies that we had put in place to ensure that we manage our biodiversity in a good manner. But somehow from our session 7, we could see that like our presenters from Bangladesh, they are struggling to protect a forest whereby in a process to conserve the forest, to gazette the forest, to become a protected area, they had faced many other challenges. As same goes to our presenter from University Putra, Dr. Nurul was mentioning about how fragmented forests give pressures to our wildlife. So our animals have to come out from the forest, and in a manner, then we have arises in roadkill issues. So I think we have policies in place, but issue might arise from time to time, and we have to revisit the existing effectiveness of our policy. On the government side, we don't have the capacity to conduct research. this is where we need strategic partnership with different academicians, universities, NGOs that could feed us with the fruitful information of which we could translate them into good policy. So I think in having a good governance to conserve our biodiversity, we need everyone in place. We need the roles of the Orang Asli and Orang Asal at our intelligence to give us information about what is going on the ground. We also need our foresters, our wildlife officers, because these are the authorities with the act that they have to conduct the enforcement and so on. And on the R&D education, we need all the NGOs and also academicians to support us with new coming up information, new insights as what is going on, where we should amend existing policies which doesn't fit the current issues. So I think that's it, Prof. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. I like revisit because now our national biodiversity policy is 5 years after relaunch in 2016.
Yeah, we are now in the process to review it.
Yes, that's
so
good idea.
We're going to have a new version of Dasar Kepelbagaian Biodiversity 2021 until 2030.
Until 2030?
Yes.
Yeah, that's good, because I just about to say the same thing, because we remember when we look at this now 2030 vision, how far we managed to achieve what we planned before. So reassessment is very good. So congratulations, KETSA, to look through into this. Next one.
So hard. I think, sorry, Prof. We also work so hard to amend our Wildlife Conservation Act as well as Forestry Act.
Yeah.
So we hope to have them by this year or next year.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. I hope we can achieve something. We have been talking a lot, but I noticed after I involved in many policy reassessment, the model that put up by Dasar Biodiversity Kebangsaan, National Biodiversity Policy, I think is one of the good approach that you put in last time. I hope this time will be improved better. So thank you and congratulations. Next, Dr. Taipan. Dr. Taipan?
Yeah. Thanks, Prof. Ahmad. So I can summarize from session 8 about the REDD+. So based on my experience and also based on the presenters' discussion, for community level, REDD+ is not so promising mechanism to provide some incentives to the community people towards conservation. So in that case, I think we need to think alternative approaches. For example, we have payment for ecosystem services, and we can also invite big corporate agencies to adopt reforestation or community forest as of their commitment to reduce carbon emissions. So that is one of the options that we can propose for community forestry, and to provide some incentives, economic incentives to the community people. And as of urban community forestry, so our previous chair, she talked about biodiversity policy in Malaysia. So I have gone through the policy 16 to 2020. It was nice. It was much improved than other previous policies. But if we look at the urban forest and the community's interest, probably we can think of formulating some policies on urban community forest management. So once we have policies, then we can try to figure out what would be the rules of different actors and what might be the responsibilities of different actors towards sustainable management of this community forest. So these are my comments.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right. I like that policy on urban forest, community forest. We tried a new minister now. I tried with 2 past ministers. They are creative. The politicians are very creative. I give one idea, they give 10 ideas. So I will try this new minister. What is his idea? What have been done by Tan Sri Saleh and the team and Dr. Kriban, we need to follow through with the. Now I'm looking at the political will. How far the politician want to push forward, because they know already this thing. So nobody talk about it, but maybe Dr. Kriban want to continue on that idea. Very interesting, I think. Because you are in the right position at the moment.
Thank you, Prof. Ahmad. Maybe I'll first start with the session I was involved with. We were talking about indigenous peoples and how they were involved in management of forests. I think what came across for me in the session quite clearly was that, and in fact, one of the speakers did mention this, that indigenous peoples are the best persons to manage our forests. And for the simple reason that they live there, they know the terrain and so on and so forth. And I remember just listening to Shah Reza as well in terms of Belum Forest, and how using indigenous communities has really made a huge difference in terms of poaching activities, for example, in Belum Forest. Again, having people who understand that environment, being able to provide this kinds of services, I think is what has been quite key for me in terms of some of the presentations. But the other, I suppose, key issue is that how do you translate what is an obvious thing to us to becoming, common knowledge to our policymakers, to in the various people who are working in the stream, the NGOs, and so on and so forth. And I think that's something which we need to do a bit better in terms of getting that information across. And if you look at the impact of indigenous communities, not only in Malaysia and in this region, but the world over, I think this keeps coming up, that a very small percentage of indigenous peoples are making a huge impact in terms of saving green lungs and livelihoods and so on. So I think education is quite important to make sure that our policy makers understand that, and also our various community leaders and so on who are involved in this area. I suppose the other aspect of it, I think Tan Sri Saleh raised it, is that if you want this to become sustainable, then the indigenous communities wherever they are need to be able to have livelihoods which can support reasonable incomes and reasonable livelihoods where they live. And so the whole issue of ecotourism and how this can work and how that money can be plowed back to the community has to be studied. And, I think those structures need to be in place to make sure that this happens. Otherwise, as you say, as the communities get more and more educated and so on, people are going to leave. And that's not what, should be intended. It should be that, this becomes sustainable and developed and the livelihoods become reasonable so that people can live and provide the kind of support we require. So those are my observations from my workshop directly, Prof. Ahmed.
Okay. Thank you very much. I saw one of your few slides. It was very, very good, very informative. That we need to deliver that message to what you mentioned just now, the community leaders and the policymakers. So yeah, maybe later we can find out. And another one, how the Kuala Lumpur indigenous people, orang asli, involved in Bukit Kiara and Kota Damansara activities.
Yes.
That is another thing that we need to highlight. I know they're involved, but we need to make it as mentioned by Dr. Wong Ipin on the structure and organization. We have to put it in their picture, how the urban indigenous people living and maintaining the forest city. So that's maybe something good to be highlight, right?
Indeed.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much, everybody. We are now over by 4 minutes. We need to continue for the next session. So thank you very much, all the moderator of the session, giving very good input. And then I know it's not that easy. Sometimes we cannot take all the notes. And then now you have done good job and then good explanation. I learned a lot. And then a good conclusion also. And then at least can guide me towards a proper declaration better and with the support of the document. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. I'll go back to Hafiz.
Thank you, Prof. Ahmad. Great questions, great sharing, great insights. Thank you so much to all our session chairs and moderators. Your presence and insights are invaluable to the success of this symposium. Thank you. Now, moving on to our next agenda, I would like to invite Prof. Ahmad onto the stage again for the symposium declaration. Prof. Ahmad?
Oh, yeah, thank you very much. So from this is from our discussion last 5 days, we come up with this conclusion. We come up with this declaration to say something, a product or outcome of our symposium. Wait, I want to close it. Okay. Now we go to the second stage declaration on the Symposium of Multi-Stakeholders Engagement for Protected Areas and Forest Governance for Conservation and Livelihoods. I read here, worldwide, there have been changes in forest management approach in the last few decades. The top-down forest management approach by central government agencies is not effective in most instances to conserve forest resources. Initiation of multi-stakeholders engagement in forest management has brought positive changes in terms of pluralistic governance, forest conservation and livelihood, improvement of the forest community. Pluralistic governance helps to empower non-state actors in the forest management decision-making process, enhances social capital between state and non-state actors, and thus facilitate to achieve desired conservation outcomes. Nonetheless, engagement of non-state actors is being challenged due to lack of their technical know-how, experience, and political influence. This symposium explored the state of multi-stakeholder engagement and associated forest protected areas conserving outcomes that would help to recommend important policy guidelines for pluralistic forest protection area governance in Malaysia. Approximately 50 presenters from 11 countries presented the ideas through research papers covering a variety of topics related to multi-stakeholder engagement in the forest governance. Insightful discussion in this 5-day virtual symposium helped us to draw up this declaration towards successful engagement of stakeholders in forest and protected area governance. State needs to understand and acknowledge the importance of multi-stakeholders engagement in forest and protected area governance. Engagement of multi-stakeholder needs institutionalization through appropriate policies, acts, and rules. Empowerment and devolution of power to local communities is necessary towards good governance at local level, and conservation initiatives ensure sustainable livelihood of local communities. And the last one, not least, governmental allocation for forests and protected areas should be increased. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Ahmad. What a momentous outcome. Not to mention that it is in conjunction with 80 years of Malaysian Nature Society, 20 years of University of Nottingham, Malaysia, and 50 years of University Putra, Malaysia.
And Merdeka Day.
Yes, and Merdeka Day at the end of the month. Very, very momentous indeed. Now, ladies and gentlemen, to officially mark the closing of the symposium, it is my pleasure to call upon our guest of honor, Yang Berbahagia Datuk Muhammad Rizza bin Awang, the Director General of Forestry, Peninsula Malaysia, Forestry Department of Peninsula Malaysia, Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. Yang Berbahagia Datuk.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon. First and foremost, I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me to give a speech and close the symposium. I would also like to express my appreciation to all session chairs and panelists for their valuable contribution to this symposium on multi-stakeholder engagement in forests, protected area governance for conservation and livelihoods over the last 5 days. My deepest gratitude goes to all who attended the symposium, even though the symposium was organized under new norm and helped to make it such a successful event. Congratulations to Malaysia Nature Society, MNS, for initiating this symposium as part of the Society 80th anniversary celebration. Congratulations also to the University of Nottingham, Malaysia and University Putra Malaysia for their collaboration in organizing the symposium. I was informed that the symposium is also involved BirdLife International and participated by participants from more than 10 countries. Through this initiative, MNS has brought together big organizations, both local and international based, to share knowledge and experiences regarding multi-stakeholder involvement in forests and protected area governance and livelihoods, and multi-stakeholder participation, especially the indigenous and local community ILC in forest governance. Meanwhile, we, Forestry Department Peninsula Malaysia, always recognize, where possible, involvement of ILC in related programs. Under the 12th Malaysian Plan, the government has allocated Ringgit Malaysia 9 million to enhance the knowledge and skills. Since nature tourism now becoming a popular activity, the Forestry Department Peninsula Malaysia also involved directly in the national tourism industry through Malaysia Tourism Excellence Business Certification, MATEX, ensuring nature-based activity will be managed sustainably. Ladies and gentlemen, another example of multi-stakeholder involvement is in tree planting campaign. This campaign known as Malaysia Greening Program. All citizens and those interested are invited to participate in the campaign to ensure the success of the agenda to make Malaysia green by planting 100 million trees across the country by 2025. The campaign website can be accessed at www.100jutapokok.gov.my. I was also being informed that MNS have their own website, www.mns.my/100jutapokok, dedicated for this campaign. This tree planting program will conserve the country biological diversity while improving the quality of the environment. Planting trees conducted not only in the inland and peat-swamp forests, but also in mangrove forests, and as well as along the national coastline. The tsunami event in 2004 has taught us that mangrove ecosystems are also important to be protected and conserved. In line with the recent government announcement to support the move for the establishment of Matang Kuala Gula Ramsar site, there are a need to conduct community public education and awareness, SEPA, and research activities. In view of this, it is important for multi-stakeholders participation to ensure this effort can be successfully achieved. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very sure from this symposium, something concrete was achieved to strengthen the policies and action in the involvement of multi-stakeholders in improving the forest and protected area governance. Policy Department Peninsular Malaysia, as always, will give our full support and open to any ideas and suggestions, where appropriate, to be incorporated in betterment of forest management and environment in the future. Finally, my deepest thanks are, of course, reserved for the Secretariat for their priceless contributions and for running a smooth event. With that, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, I declare the symposium closed. Thank you.
Thank you, Yang Berbahagia Dato'. So I've been given 15 minutes to share with our three principal partners to make a quick 5-minute summary and conclusion of the whole symposium from their perspective. Let me start off with Prof. Ahmad of MNS first. Prof. Ahmad, 5 minutes of conclusion. You're muted, Prof. We still don't hear you.
All right, thank you very much for the very short. Thank you very much, Hafiz. Ladies and gentlemen, I think this come to the end. I would like to thank to Yang Bahagia Dato' Riza, Ketua Pengarah, Director General of Peninsular Malaysia Forest Department. And the very important statement he made, and few things we forgot to discuss about Ramsar site, and he mentioned about Ramsar site is something that we need to move forward, and it's a very great challenge to educate public, local people, local community, and also the government department to support this agenda. That statement was mentioned by the previous minister, and now the Director General, so meaning that we need to help, support and move forward to protect our environment. I would like to thank all the moderators have been doing a good job to support this agenda to achieve our objective in the MNS series of 80th anniversary. We have to postpone this, supposed to be last year, and we had to plant 150 trees out of this symposium, but because of MCO, we postponed it. We already planted 3 trees. Hopefully we can do it later, slowly and systematically, so that we have 150 trees. I would like to thank all the participants. We have averaged 100 a day, and then total up some a little bit low, total up nearly 1,000 of participants. So I hope the message will go to these all participants, and then we share, because it's the purpose of this symposium is to share with the stakeholders and then come together. MNS as an NGO always open to bring people together, working together to support the government vision, especially what the Director General mentioned just now about 100 million trees. We have to plant it from now every day. So thanks to the Secretariat who have been working so hard. I cannot imagine everybody stay in their house and then collaborating through phone and then trees networking. If we stay in one place, it may be easy to communicate. I congratulate you. I've been working hard for last maybe more over a year, because we postponed it, right? And getting the participants, analyze it, put it together, and then follow through. And today we come to the conclusion. And then I hope the declaration what we make can be applied and presented to the agencies so that we can move forward together. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. And then, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Prof. Always very uplifting. Secondly, let me call upon Dr. Tapan of University of Nottingham, Malaysia. Dr. Tapan, your 5 minutes.
Yep. Thanks, Hafiz. So it was, I think, 2019 when I met Balu in my university. So he approached me and asked me whether I would be interested to collaborate with MNS with him. to organize this symposium. So I should say we should remember Balu, our best friend. We lost him very unfortunately. So I should thanks my university for giving us the permission to collaborate to host this important symposium. Also thanks MNS for all around support by engaging all staff. I think, in fact, all staffs are involved here with this symposium. And I also thanks our collaborators from UPM who tried their best to support this symposium. And I also thanks all participants, chairpersons, moderators who volunteered in this symposium to share their experiences. And I also thank the chief editor of Journal of Sustainable Forestry, who agreed to publish a special issue on this topic, on symposium topic. And we already published 10 papers from our symposium online in this special issue. So hopefully this special issue will be announced in next year. So finally, I should say, during our discussion with Balu and MNS counterparts, so sometimes we discussed that we need to continue this dialogue. Even if not yearly, we can meet every 2 years so that we can continue this kind of dialogue. And we can keep up this momentum for the welfare of the society, for the benefit of our environment. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Tapan. Continuous collaboration, Doctor. Last but not least, let me give the floor to Dr. Iza of University Putra Malaysia. Dr. Iza, we've not heard you yet, so this is your 5 minutes.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you to MC for today, Mr. Hafiz. As for UPM, it is a very grateful and meaningful event for UPM to be as a co-organizer together with MNS and University of Nottingham, Malaysia, to involve in this meaningful symposium of multi-stakeholders engagement in forest protected area governance for conservation and livelihood. Through these events, we had learned a lot of things about forest management, how we can improve and how we can make betterment in what we already have. This symposium is a very precious symposium whereby it's not just we sharing our knowledge and findings, but we are also learning a lot from the other people, not just from Malaysia, but also from the other countries. Through this 5-day symposium, it is amazingly that we know many peoples are very concerned about forests from different backgrounds. As a representative for UPM, I heard that this collaboration in organizing symposium together with MNS and University of Nottingham, Malaysia would be continued, and not just in terms of symposium, but also in research and others aspect of works related to forest management. And last but not least, I heard and I really hope that the declaration that we had made in this symposium would be materialized soon. With that, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Iza. Thank you. Once again, a big thank you to all our chairpersons, moderators, speakers, and over 1,300 audiences for making this symposium a success. We hope that everyone has gained incredible insights and know-how in protecting our natural heritage. It is a collective effort from all parties, from local communities to authorities. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank all the partners who have made this symposium possible: University of Nottingham, Malaysia, University Putra Malaysia, My Forest Watch, BirdLife International, the European Union, International Green Tech and Eco Product Exhibition and Conference Malaysia, IGEM, and last but not least, the support of members from the Malaysian Nature Society. I am also honored to be able to pay a tribute and recognition to our late Dr. Balu Perumal, Conservation Head of Department at Malaysian Nature Society, Principal Officer in the My Forest Watch Project, a forester, environmentalist, father, friend, just a laid-back, tak ada apa, stand-up kind of guy that many of us remember and respect. One last note is for everyone to keep an eye out for a survey that will be sent to your registered email address. We would love to hear from you. We would love to hear your feedback and your suggestions. With that, I wish everyone a safe and wonderful weekend ahead. Thank you so much for being part of the symposium. Goodbye.